All right. Setting up. And we're live. I will mute this. What are saying? All right. Come back to you.
So you're going to let people in from the waiting room?
Welcome, everyone. As you join us, we will just give everyone a few minutes to get their audio set up, and we will begin shortly. All right. Looks like we are in good shape. Welcome, everyone, to the next in the Pragmatic Institute product chats. My name is Eddie Gordon, courseware designer at Pragmatic Institute, and it is lovely to see you. Just a couple housekeeping items up at the top. Through the course of our broadcast today, if you are able to or willing to, we'd love to have you turn your cameras on. I personally think it actually helps the presenters feel a little bit more like they're talking to real people. So if you're comfortable with that, we love to see your smiling faces. Turn those cameras on if you can. As far as questions, if you have them during the course of the presentation, go ahead and put them in the chat. You can either broadcast them to everyone in the chat if you like, or you can send them just to myself personally, Eddie Gordon. I'll keep an eye on those as we go along and toss them over to our presenters. And then, of course, if we have time at the end, we can do a whole lot more questions as well. So put those in the chat as you have them. I just have to give a shout out to the new Pragmatic Institute Pragmatic Alumni Community, we call it. The Pragmatic Alumni Community, or the PAC for the hip kids out there, if you want to call it that, is brand new. This is different than the Alumni Resource Center that you may already be a member of if you are an alumni of the Pragmatic Institute courses. The PAC, you can see it on the slide there, is for members only. And inside the PAC, once you become a member, you will find curated libraries, peer discussion groups, access to the instructors. They'll be on there all the time. Member exclusive events. It's kind of a big deal, and we are very proud of it. If you would like a better idea of what it looks like and what's going on in there, be sure to check out the free open house to the Pragmatic Alumni Community. That happens tomorrow. Today's the 9th, right? Yeah, it happens tomorrow, June 10th, 1:30 Eastern time, at the website at the bottom of the slide there, pragmaticinstitute.com/community. Check that out. It is a fantastic brand new resource for the product community. You're going to want to be there. All right, enough gabbing from me. Our guests today have long histories of development and leadership in the area of customer advisory boards. They are both senior consultants and facilitators with Ignite Advisory Group, the world's leading consultancy for helping B2B companies engage with executives and key accounts through customer advisory and partner advisory boards. Here today to talk about the special challenge of customer advisory boards in today's markets, please welcome Bonnie Smith and Rob Jensen. Bonnie and Rob, hello and welcome.
Thanks, Eddie. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Eddie.
Bonnie, if you want to go to the next slide, we can introduce ourselves a bit. My name is Rob Jensen. I've been a consultant for advisory boards for many years, but I also spent many years in high tech and marketing positions. Bonnie?
And I'm Bonnie Smith, also a senior consultant and facilitator with Ignite. And so I've spent a number of years both in the field and field sales and also in customer engagement roles. And I've been with Ignite now for a couple of years, helping lots of clients like yourselves and Fortune 500 companies launch, executive level and product advisory boards and even some partner advisory boards. But thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, excited to be here. Next slide. So just a bit about Ignite Advisory Group. We are the only firm dedicated to customer advisory boards. We have about 20 consultants. We have operations in the US and around the world. And we do have a good content site with many articles that you can check out on this topic. So we focus on customer advisory boards. Next, Bonnie. We do offer consulting around creating a board, virtual meetings, optimizing existing programs, hiring a facilitator and getting training. Next slide. And we have many customers in the technology, financial services, security, and various other businesses. So many Fortune 500 companies you might recognize there. Okay, so that's just a bit about Ignite. So, hey, we were talking about this before everyone got on. Let's talk about, managing your customer advisory boards during this pandemic crazy time that we live in. Next slide, Bonnie. But before we do, we want to kind of get a quick poll of where everyone is at relative to your program. So if you click it, what do? They click on the poll button, Bonnie?
So yeah, so if you could answer the poll, it's question number 1. Hold off on answering question number 2. So let us know what's the status of your current customer advisory board program. We'll give you about a minute to respond.
And is the poll up right now, Bonnie?
It is.
Oh, okay. I saw it earlier. I don't see.
Do you guys see it?
No.
I don't.
We don't see it yet, Bonnie.
Okay. I think you are going to need to, somebody else is going to need to, oh, here we go. Got it.
There we go. We got it.
All right.
Launched the wrong poll. Sorry, guys.
Okay, what's the status of your program? Don't have one, haven't started one, trying to launch it. Maybe the coronavirus has delayed or complicated it. Existing program on hold, postponed, meetings moved from in-person to virtual, or your program's unchanged. Meetings are taking place as normal. So
Right.
submit your, okay.
Just waiting for about maybe 40 more people to answer.
And then do we see the results?
We will.
Awesome.
So I'll give it about 10 more seconds. All right, let's take a look at this results.
Bonnie, you'll probably get to this, but interestingly, in the chat, there's another option for a question. We're trying to decide if we should move the live program to virtual, or even what is a customer advisory board. So we got some stuff to talk about today.
Yeah, wow, okay. Looking at the results, it's interesting. Many, 28% people are saying that they, don't have a program, haven't started one yet. Maybe you're considering it, maybe you're investigating, you're not even sure what a customer advisory board is. So, interesting, people trying to launch, many people have programs that have, about over a third have moved them to virtual, and then some people programs unchanged. So interesting results there.
Okay, and Rob, did you want to take any of these questions before you started, or do you want to wait?
As far as what a customer advisory board program is, it's a group of your executives representing your best customers that you can get together for myriad benefits. And for those who are, interested in the basics, maybe Google it and check out the Ignite resource page for, some background.
Okay, and Christina, we'll get your question probably within the process.
Yeah. Okay, should we go to the next slide, Bonnie? Okay, so hey, we're living in the worldwide coronavirus pandemic. Business travel is halted. In-person meetings are postponed. Everyone's working remotely. Some businesses are heavily impacted, right? Hotels, airlines, and then others less so, right? Business goes on. In fact, I was on a customer advisory board call a couple weeks ago, and some businesses have benefited from the pandemic, right? Grocery stores or other businesses, right? So the pandemic, is temporary, right? It's not going to go on forever. Business will resume at some point, hopefully soon. To what extent and how that's different will be different for every industry, but everyone's impacted by this, right? So Bonnie, if you go to the next slide. So sometimes we were talking about this before is, sometimes companies' initial thought is, hey, we're going to put everything on hold and figure this out, and we'll get back to customer engagement or customer advisory boards later. And we feel that this pandemic actually is an ideal time to initiate or continue your customer advisory board program at this time, right? Number one is to demonstrate leadership. Your customers might, be unsure of what's happening in their industry and what's going on with their colleagues. And this represents an opportunity for companies to be proactive and, not only check in on your customers, but let them know how your services or products are changing, and share best practices on how they can get through, working in the challenge, right? Another message that we're getting is a lot of times we're approached by companies and they say, hey, we want to have a customer advisory board. We want it next month. And we're like, oh, there's so many steps to start it and do it right. And it inevitably turns into kind of a rush of and focus on logistics for the meeting. And, with no in-person meetings happening in the next, foreseeable future, now's the opportunity, sometimes all too rare for us marketers, to take time and plan and, establish a strong program and get a charter and your goals and recruit the best members and then engage customers before to create a member-driven agenda. So take advantage of this time when we're not, we don't have a meeting in person next month in Dallas, right? The other reason is, using virtual technologies. Boy, we were talking about this before, is, with Zoom meetings and online technologies, there's so many opportunities to meet virtually, and everyone's getting used to it, and everyone is, getting comfortable and seeing the benefits of meeting virtually. So you can definitely initiate or continue your customer advisory board program using virtual technologies. And in the months ahead, you can prepare for in-person meetings, getting ahead on planning, not only the location and activities, but the content, the topics, what your members want to hear about, and talking about returning to business, adjusting to the new normal. So these are the top 5 reasons we think companies should be continuing with their customer engagement. And I don't know, Bonnie, if you have any other thoughts or color on this, to jump in anytime. You're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and Christina asked this question. And so, now is definitely not the time to talk less to your most critical customers, right?
Yeah.
The economy is a little bit shaky right now. Every business is being impacted differently. So, this is definitely not the time when you want to step away from your customers and engage with them less. And the other thing that's nice is, while customer advisory boards have always classically been in person, press the flesh, executive to executive, everyone understands that's not possible now. So they're really very open to engaging in this virtual format in a way that they, probably haven't been in the past.
Yeah, even more available.
Right.
Yeah, good point, Bonnie. Next slide, if you would. So, why virtual customer advisory board meetings? Now, obviously, meeting in person is ideal. It's best to, read, nonverbal communication. But these days, it's an opportunity to keep members informed, engaged, contributing. How's your business continuing? Maybe prospering, succeeding, providing, like I said, proactive leadership and guidance for your customers, keeping, if you have an existing program, keeping your momentum that you've gathered and worked hard and invested in, keep that momentum going forward. In other words, don't go dark. This is not the time to go dark, I think is what Bonnie and I are saying. Virtual and online meetings are ideal for the current environment. The cost, the travel, the time savings, interim communications should be already part of a strong, communications timeline for a customer advisory board programs. And, you should invest the time to do them well. This is not the time to mail it in, right? That's for, continuing virtual customer advisory board meetings. Next, Bonnie. So as you are continuing your customer advisory board program virtually, there's 5 keys of success that we've identified that will be key to making sure your program is well run. And I'll pause right here for Eddie and or Bonnie if there's any questions. I know we're getting them in. Is there any questions we want to address?
There are a couple coming in. You may be getting to this one here, but the first question, this will give you an idea of what people are thinking as you're opening the topic.
Yeah.
From Faraz says, how do you curate content for these interactions to be engaging? We've struggled in the past to keep it interesting for our members. What tips and suggestions might you have?
Great question. And we are going to cover that in the next section.
Yep. The other one that just popped in is an agreement. I agree completely about not going dark. However, is anyone moving forward with in-person meetings in this calendar year, or would they all moving to virtual? That's probably a company by company decision, I would think, but for the most part, not many in-person meetings happening right now, right?
Yeah, that's a great question, and people are looking ahead. So originally it was, hey, let's, we'll plan for the fall. And that was kind of assumed, certainly by my customers. And now everyone's starting to rethink that. And I have not heard of an in-person meeting being scheduled. Bonnie, I don't know if, I don't know if you were the one who had a
No, all of my clients have pushed to first quarter of 2021.
Yeah, so no in-person that we're aware of right now. Maybe that'll change. I mean, gosh, we know this situation's so dynamic and things are opening, but then there's a spike or it's hard to predict several months out right now, but none that we're aware of.
We'll probably have a couple more questions coming through, but I bet you're going to get to some of these topics within minutes.
All right. So, tip number 1 for continuing a virtual customer advisory board program is invest in preparation, right? You want to address topics that members want to cover. And how do you know what that is? Well, hopefully you've engaged them in several ways. One is if you have an existing customer advisory board program, you've had previous meetings and you have surveys and you ask, hey, what topics do you want to see in future meetings? And so they've hopefully told you the kind of topics that they want to cover. You've had meetings where these topics have addressed, they've come up, there's been great discussion on this one, less so on this one. So for those who have existing programs, hopefully you have kind of some data you can look back on that the customers want to engage with forward on certain topics. For new programs, we recommend, engaging with their customers via interviews, right? Ask them, talk to them. We interview every customer advisory board member for new customer advisory programs, certainly for establishing that initial agenda by interviewing them. 30 minutes, put some topics in front of them, ask them to, prioritize. So engage them. I mean, you can also do it, through surveys and everything, but an interview is the best way, right? Line up engaging session leaders. So, get with the thought leaders within your company. You'll notice we don't call them presenters. They're leading a session on a topic that we want to get output from, that we want input. We want questions to be answered. It's not a presentation, right? Review all the meeting materials, right? Go through the deck, make sure everyone sees it. Everyone's comfortable with it. It's the latest ones. Practice and rehearsal with the company participants. So everyone who's going to be on the call is seeing the content, right? And then test the virtual meeting technology, right? That the polling and the how you're going to get input and the voting and raising your hands. Test that with on your prep calls, right? So do invest in preparation. Don't just show up and hope the session owner has his content and surely everything will go okay. Even when I prepare, sometimes crazy things happen. I don't know, Bonnie, your thoughts?
No, I think you definitely got it right. And I think the key, at least in what I've seen, is bullet point number 2 has always been important, even for in-person meetings. but it's especially true for virtual meetings. So it's one of the things you may want to remind your folks of as they're starting the meeting is, yes, we're all alone in our own little room, but I need you to pretend that you're sitting at the table with these customers, look into the camera, smile, not too creepy level, obviously, but you know, keep your energy level up, and you know, again, try to really act as if you were having a one-on-one discussion with these folks.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you still have to prepare, and don't prepare less because it's virtual as opposed to an in-person. You still want to prepare.
Rob, there was a question from Arthi in the chat that's getting some traction.
Yeah.
People are curious, how do you ensure or encourage participation in the meetings during the pandemic, considering that they may have reallocated their resources to other business endeavors during that time?
It's a great question, and it's something that we're always messaging. And Bonnie, I believe it's the next slide that we want, that we cover this.
That was a transition for you.
Yeah.
Did you feel that?
Yes.
Feel that
Oh,
smooth
perfect.
transition? Yeah.
I'm
yeah.
glad you asked that, Eddie. So planning for engagement, right? So guys, this is not a webinar. You know, if it's just someone's going to present something and questions at the end or no questions, it's a webinar. You can just put it on your website, right? Customer advisory boards are two-way conversations and engaging with their customers. So for each session, why are you addressing this topic, right? What are the goals from this session? What are you trying to get out of it? What are you trying to communicate? And then what are you trying to learn from your members? What questions are you trying to answer? And put these on a slide, right? Put this in the beginning. Here's what we're trying to learn from this session, you guys. And here are the questions we're trying to answer, and put them up, right? Sometimes when people are participating in a webinar, they're not sure what you're asking them, and maybe they're multitasking or they've got other distractions. So put those questions in there. Communicate at the beginning why you're doing this session. Don't just jump into your content. Communicate why you're doing it, what you're trying to learn. Design sessions to elicit responses, right? So, put in a question at the beginning, a polling question. Let's vote, yay or nay. How many are feeling this, right? We did that, we had a polling question in here just to kind of get people, thinking and engaged and get the juices flowing. Put in questions and opportunities in your session to gather responses for voting, for prioritizing, make that a part of your content. And then again, leverage meeting technologies, not only video, but there's active cursor I've seen, so you can highlight and circle things, and polling questions and voting and raising your hand. Use those, right? We're all getting more comfortable with those. So do use them, right? And do not, so in other words, what not to do: canned PowerPoint presentation, abundance of news and updates from your company, that they could probably get from your website or PR page, demos, just making it a one-way conversation. Don't do that. I hope that makes sense, and hopefully that answers, kind of how to prepare and plan for engagement to make these, lively sessions, right? Bonnie, I don't know, your thoughts on this?
Nope, I think you did a good job on this, Rob.
Okay. Okay, we can go to the next session and this. Okay. Another idea, to consider is increasing the frequency, right? So sometimes as our customers are putting together the agenda for a virtual CAB meeting, is the agenda starts to get a little long, right? It's a full agenda. Hey, we need to gather a lot of input and feedback, and we're thinking maybe 6 hours and, a long onerous session. Maybe break it up, right? I think, in our experience, 2 hours is a good amount of time to get people on the line. You'd want to break after that. Maybe break up your interactions to shorter, multiple engagements. I did with one customer, and we had it over a couple days, couple hours, couple days. Seemed to work well, as opposed to, an 8-hour marathon, right? Maybe plan a series. Do this every month at the end of the beginning of the month, or however it works, right? So consider changing the frequency. It doesn't have to be one long meeting. Doesn't have to be, right? Next one, Bonnie. And then, use a skilled facilitator, right? You just don't want a batting order of presenters. You want to make sure that, there's a facilitator. They've established the participation guidelines. So if one of your customers, hey, I have an idea or a question or a thought, how are they supposed to contribute to that? Put those guidelines at the beginning of the session, right? Ensure all voices are heard. Go around in the beginning and have people introduce themselves and their top challenge, right? The facilitator can also clear up bottlenecks, keep the meeting on track, right? If an executive's going long, host company people might not want to interrupt. You know, the facilitator can keep the agenda on time and make sure that you're not running over, and make sure that the content's delivering the desired outcomes, right? Virtual meeting killers are unclear participation ground rules, boring in one way, minimal discussion, nothing learned from the participants, right? Third-party facilitators, they're skilled and experienced. There's a perceived neutrality, demonstrates that the host company is serious about this and ensures an optimal experience. So some things to keep in mind there. Use a facilitator. Okay, and then finally, Bonnie, last one for the top 5 before we maybe pause for any questions at this point. If you go to the next slide, Bonnie, unless you
Oh, sorry, I thought you said wait. Sorry.
Next. So then finally, tip number 5, must-do number 5 is communicate the outcomes, right? So you review the goals and the desired questions in the beginning of a session. Were they achieved? Were they answered? If not, ask them again. When you're done with your engagement, put together a meeting report, summarize the discussions, capture inputs, feedback, and suggestions, right? What did your customers say they wanted? What would they like to see, right? And then create from those potential company actions and next steps, right? You can meet with your stakeholders after the meeting and get your arms around these, talk about them, prioritize them, commit to some, and then assign leads and timelines of, hey, yeah, let's do that. This guy's going to be in charge of it, and we're going to try to get that by Q4 of this year, and then communicate that back to your members at some point. It can be, you can send the report to your members, hey, we're going to do this. And then when you have your engagement later, you can show them the progress or the status of what the action is. And then your members say, wow, I gave some ideas and they listened and they're moving on that. That's like the number one reason that customers will get value out of their participation, is seeing that their input is leading to changes. The flip side of that is if they give you a suggestion and they whatever happened with that, I don't know, they'll ask again in front of everybody, in front of all your executives. And if they're not seeing progress on that, they'll start to lose interest. So goodbye. If we go to the next slide, I mean, those are the top 5, must-dos. And before we get kind of to the next topic, Eddie or Bonnie, what are people feeling, and what are some of the questions in the chat?
Rob, we've got a great audience, and the questions and the offered solutions that are coming up in the chat are invaluable, I believe. So very enriching over there. Here's a two-parter question for you. So Rose mentioned that their company had done some managing of over-eager attendees in advance, the ones that try to take over the meeting and make it all about them and their wish list. So that's part 1, but then part 2, Sandy asked, are there tips for ensuring that all participants are contributing to the discussions? So the 2 polar extremes there, over participation and non-participation. What do you do for those?
Hey, Bonnie, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I was just reading in the chat window. My bad. So what was the question that you put out there?
So I think I can take that one. So managing overachieving, over-eager participants, and then kind of calling out those that are maybe quiet, again, takes a skilled facilitator. When you're in person, you can kind of see that and do that, but on the phone, you can, kind of ask. You can, a skilled facilitator can say, hey, that's great input, thank you very much. Hey, I want to hear from someone, maybe in the automotive industry or the hotel industry. There's kind of little tips you can do to kind of encourage people. And those eager people, you can kind of manage a bit. It's a bit of an art form, and it's even more. It's another degree of challenge to do it online, but it can be done. And again, and it's normal in every meeting to have those people who really participate a lot, and then those who kind of sit and listen. And everyone has a different style. But a good facilitator can ensure that everyone's voice is heard and no one's dominating the meeting.
Yeah, and what's nice that you can do that's a little different with virtual is, you can actually use the chat function to chat to a member and say, hey, I know it's been really hard to jump in here. Is there something you wanted to add to this discussion? I'll call on you if so. And
Yeah,
so I've
great
found
point.
that, you know, between watching for people's microphones becoming unmuted, which is an indicator that says this person wants to speak, so track that. And then the other thing is, like I said, if they chat back and say, yes, yes, absolutely, I wanted to talk, I didn't want to talk over people.
Sure. And another thing that will be another kind of element is, you know, your members have participated in an interview. They may have provided a survey, their answers to a survey. They may, you know, they may have participated previously. You know about what's going on in their industry or their account or, you know, their company. Sometimes you can ask about that. Hey, there's a good example from the healthcare industry, right? I mean, George, didn't you guys experience that challenge? That's sometimes a good way. You might have some, you know, information that you're aware of that you can bring to the fore, and that'll encourage that customer to, you know, kind of jump in and give their experience.
Rob, here's an interesting one from Tung, who asks, how do we make sure that the topics that the board is discussing are interesting? Oh, sorry, that the members are interested in, and the feedback that the board is providing apply to the majority of the customer base? How do you keep them on topics that are actually going to apply to the customers instead of their own hobby horses, right?
Yeah, again, there too, you're asking. You ask the members through surveys, previous meetings, interviews. You're getting them prioritized to vote on topics, and you know what they want to talk about might be different from what you thought they wanted to talk about or what you are planning to tell them, right? So you ask and engage during the meeting, and this happens, and you know Bonnie can attest to this too. You know, you'll be talking about a particular topic and another one, kind of a tangent one, comes up. And the facilitator can say, hey, that's another great topic. And what we do is we capture that in what's called a treasure box where, hey, that's a great topic. We're not really talking about that now, but let's capture that to talk about at another, you know, engagement. It could be later in the day or another meeting or, you know, next time. Or maybe if that's a topic that everyone is so interested in, you change your agenda on the fly to focus on that, right? You probably don't need to do that if you've engaged people before, but sometimes this comes up, but you do try to stick to the topic at hand. And also by showing the full agenda, you know, at the beginning, hey, we're going to cover this, this, and that. People can say, oh, I'm interested in topic number 3, and I see we're going to cover that. So I'll hold my questions or complaints or you know, issues with that topic until we get to it, right?
We had a few questions and comments about both compensating monetarily the members of the board, but also gifts. And I think Bonnie chimed in the chat about monetary compensation, but what about gifts? Is that frowned on or is that nice?
What are your thoughts, Bonnie?
Oh, gifts are entirely appropriate. And so I think as long as what we found is as long as you keep the gifts so that it appears to be $50 or under, then, you know, your customers are going to accept the gift. And as you know, sometimes when we do branded gifts, it's a $50 gift that once you brand it, it actually really costs your company $100, but you don't need to know that, right? As long as it sort of appears to be a gift of nice but nominal value, that's entirely appropriate.
Yeah, I agree, Bonnie. And so you never need to compensate your customers for participating on your customer advisory board. And none of my customers have ever done that. They've asked to do it because they think they're going to need that in order to get them to commit and participate. But what happens is by inviting your members in a really professional, well-communicated way, you don't have to compensate them. You'll get an abundance of agreements and RSVPs and commitments to participate. You don't have to compensate them just to participate. And again, gifts are great. They don't have to be very expensive. In fact, many companies can't accept gifts. You know, government contractors, a lot of different ones, they're not even allowed to accept gifts over above, like Bonnie said, maybe $50. It's a nice little touch, especially if you give a gift that represents the location of a meeting. I've done that in the past, right? But it's a nice touch. Not required though, not required. And gosh, don't make it a science project and spend hours and hours and hours on the gift, which has happened in my experience too.
Rob, we've got plenty of questions coming in. I could throw them at you all day. Do you want to get to your top 10 tips, or do you want to take more questions? Up to you.
Let's take some more questions before
Let's do it. Here,
more.
this was an interesting one from Paul, who asks, can we distinguish between a customer advisory board and a focus panel? And then he offers the way that their company distinguishes between the two. How do you do that?
Again, Bonnie, I mean, jump in if you have a strong opinion here. Mine would be that, you know, a focus group, this is my experience, a focus group is really dedicated to a particular topic, meaning that, let's say you're a software company and you want to run a focus group about, hey, this software, what do you think about it? How do you like this button? Should it be blue? Should it be over here? It's very tactical and a very product focused, whereas a customer advisory board is more strategic, more larger thinking on more strategic, impactful topics that affect your company and all the members, right? So a well-run customer advisory board can deliver much more value, higher level value than a focus group, which is typically more tactical, more users as opposed to your members, right? Those on your customer advisory board may or may not be your product users, right? And you want to distinguish that. You do not want to mix, right? So kind of that's kind of the thought there. And Bonnie, I don't know if you have any, you know, thoughts or other.
No, absolutely. Yeah, there's been a couple of questions in there about that. There was another one, Rob, where somebody said, you know, how do you deal with a customer who is using a customer advisory board just to sort of forward their own like functional changes they want to make to the product? So, you know, that's kind of along the same lines. I think your answer applies there as well.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. You will have product sessions. You will have user experience and challenges or desires and roadmap and features. And we're going to get to that in this session, by the way. But you want to keep it high level. You don't want it to dissolve into a tactical user meeting, demos, and, you know, in version 5.7.8.5 V2, you don't want to do that, right? I hope that answers the question. And, you know, everyone's company and business and products are different, and it's hard to create the best answer that matches every single company out there, but that's the general, you know, sort of thought and kind of things to keep in mind, right? You shouldn't, you know, sometimes salespeople or product people will get excited at the opportunity to lock their customers in a room for 7 hours and get our demo and our latest version, and that'll sell them and they'll get excited. That's not what this is about, right? Putting that idea out.
So a follow-up along that lines then, this question, should your customer advisory board also be your beta users if you're specifically a software group? Should these be the same people?
They can be, and they're often the best people for that. In fact, that's actually a benefit for joining the customer advisory board, is you'll have opportunity to be a beta customer for your new versions. And that way these people can not only test it, but they can provide ideas and input and thoughts for how they would like the product, how they would use it. And as a customer, to get a change to make it work for you, that's a pretty nice benefit of joining the customer advisory board, right? So yes, and that's been my experience as well, often. So Bonnie, why don't we go to the next session? I think we have our second poll question to keep everyone engaged. So if you pull up the poll, or if Bonnie can put that up.
Yep, it's coming up. Okay. There we go.
Okay, so for those of you who do have a meeting coming up, how are you planning to facilitate it? You know, maybe you don't have a facilitator. Maybe you are the facilitator. You know, another person from your company is going to do it. Maybe you already know that it's wise to use a professional third-party facilitator, or maybe you don't know. You haven't got that far, right? So everybody vote here. Maybe some of you have worked at companies where if you're asking the question, who does this? That person is you, the person asking. That's been for many of the companies that I worked for. All right, Bonnie, so do we have the results? I know people are, the votes are.
We got about 70% of the people voted, so I'll give it, oh, there we go, 1 minute. All right, so I'll end the poll now.
Okay,
All right, so what did you think of this, Rob?
let's see, let's pop up those results and hopefully I can see them.
Oh, sorry, gotta press the share results button.
There we go. Well, glad nobody has, that 0 people said no facilitator. Some people are facilitators here. Someone from their company will do it. We're using a professional, not too many. Unknown, haven't got that far. Okay, so some things to think about. And for those of you who, you know, hey, someone from my company will facilitate, you know, I throw the question, I don't know how you can answer. Are they good? Do they do a good job? Are they, you know, do they keep the conversation moving? Do they understand your business? Do they understand the customers, their accounts? You know, some do a great job, others not as good. Keep that in mind. Okay, so if we go to the last section here, Bonnie, you know, some tips for facilitating a meeting, for a virtual meeting, you know, allow a couple minutes before starting. You know, if you start right on time, you might miss a couple people that get in late. Do a roll call, encourage webcams, introduce the facilitator and the participation ground rules, right? So everyone's comfortable with, hey, I have an idea. How do I contribute that? Some people never do that because they didn't know how. And then, you know, actively, you know, you can probe the members, ask questions, you know, call out different industries, different regions, different products in use. You know, a good facilitator can do that. Bonnie, if we get to the next slide, a few more tips. You know, make sure you're hearing everyone. If you do introductions in the top challenge, you kind of break that seal and get people talking. Feel free to provide time limits, right? 2-minute or 3-minute intro. Show the desired questions. I mentioned that earlier. Sometimes people aren't sure what you're asking them. Put the questions on the screen. If people come in late, introduce them. Hey, this person just got here. But you don't want to put people on the spot. You know, hey, Eddie, what do you think of that? Right? Maybe they were not paying attention or not, or they don't know, or they don't have an answer, they're learning. And, you know, it takes a little experience and kind of some adeptness to some, you know, to get people to participate without putting them on the spot. So if we go to the next slide, Bonnie. Another idea, you know, these days is, you know, if you have video technology, do use it. But if not, and some people don't want to do it, hey, just put their picture up. As simple as that, right? Hey, here's who we got on the call today. Here's who they are, where they're from. You know, sometimes it's hard to, you know, for the customers to who was that person? Where are they from? You know, but put the pictures on the screen. That way everyone kind of is aware of who everyone is, you know, reminds them of, oh, I saw that person last time. Yeah, I remember that person, right? Next screen, next slide. And then, you know, for your product managers, product marketers out there collecting and prioritizing product feedback, you know, some thoughts here, you know, show the proposed roadmap and coming features and timelines, but it should not feel like completely baked. Like, hey, you know, so don't say, here's our roadmap features for the next 3 years and here's what it is and it's all done. Any questions, right? Make sure you're engaging the customers before you put that together to get them to be able to, you know, put their input, prioritize. Maybe the #1 feature you're working on is not important to them. And this other one that's, you know, 7th on your list actually is. Make sure you bring it in early enough where you're capturing the product, the company's desires, right? And then prioritize. How do you do that? You know, voting. It can be stickers. It can be money. It can be, you know, various tips and games. And this is where meetings get actually really fun, where people are coming up and, you know, voting and giving their input. And then, you know, there might be some features you have on your list that nobody votes for, gets $0, you know, 0, you know, sticky notes. Do you still want to make that for something that no one wants? You know, consider dropping it. And then you want to go off the board, right? What's missing? What additional features and functions? You know, think outside the box. So, you know, if you see this example here, there's the feature list, but then there's a whole list of other things that are not on the list that people want, right? And then also consider, you know, hey, integrations with other systems. How are you plugging this in, and how's it integrating with, you know, what systems are your customers using? It might be what you know, it might be other ones you might not be aware of, or others are emerging, or other companies that they're also partnering with that you want to partner with or get to know, or acquire, right? Next step, show the results. Here's the results of what everybody voted for. Be transparent with it, and then provide updates on how that's going to impact your product roadmap going forward, and provide status and updates, as things progress over time. What do you think, Bonnie? Did I get it all?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of chat going on in the window too that's talking about like how can we do this virtually, and so there's a couple of different ways you can do it. One, we know about the polling that's built into many of the virtual platforms. If you have a virtual platform that it does not have breakout meeting capability, it doesn't have polling capability, you can use something called Poll Everywhere, and it does have a free level of service. And what it does is you can actually incorporate the questions and polls, and there's a lot of different things it can do. It's actually more complex than just the poll that's available to you in Zoom, for example. And it just brings the poll right into your PowerPoint slide deck. So that's, one thing you can use, and that may be able to help you with some of the prioritization feedback that you may be looking for in this.
Oh, good. I'm also seeing some suggestions from the participants today of other platforms that allow for, collaboration and engagement. So that's great.
Rob, I wonder if you might just flip back to the slide that showed tips 1 through 5 again. Looks like some people were missing that as it went past. There we go.
Oh.
There you go. Take note. Also, just a quick mention for the audience, the whole presentation we're going to make available on our YouTube page. So you'll be able to find all the slides there and the whole presentation with the questions, as well as Bonnie and Rob's presentation. So that's on the Pragmatic Institute YouTube page. You'll find that. Rob, how are we doing? Do you want to, there's fantastic questions coming in still, or do you want to give us a wrap up here?
Let me wrap up, but I'm here. I can be here all day. So I do want to get to the questions, but for those of you who do have questions, or for those who drop off, Bonnie, if you get to the next session, right? Hey, we've got a lot of questions today. I do want to answer them now, but there are resources of where you can go to get more information. Bonnie, if you go to the next slide, if you go to www.igniteag.com resources, we have videos and other webinars. We have a newsletter, we have books, other podcasts, a bunch of customer advisory board resources, our blog. For some of the questions we got today, I've written a blog on some of these exact questions, right? So I know I talk fast and maybe kind of provided some, fast overall guidance, but there's more details there as well. For those who would like that. And if you go to the next slide, Bonnie, I'd mentioned training previously. We do have a training coming up in July. These have traditionally been in person, but hey, like everything else, it's now online. So we do have a training session coming up in July. I don't know if you can see the dates, but it's the 14th or the 30th. And for those who are on the call today, we have a special discount that's at this link here, 15% off for everyone on this call to join training. And it's best practices and the materials, and really dives into all the different steps that we've talked about today. And then Bonnie, lastly, I think there's one more. Oh, for those of you who do have questions and you have a program and probably not enough time to get your questions answered, hey, give us a call. Let us know what's going on with your program. You'll talk to my colleague Gavin, who is an expert himself. He'll give you his thoughts on the program, what your needs are. Let us know what the status is. Maybe it's not going as well. Maybe you have a bunch of other questions. Maybe you have many that you're not going to get answered today. Give us a call. Free consultation. We'll give you our thoughts. So next slide, Bonnie. All right, so Eddie, with that, questions.
Let's do it. We've got a few more to throw at you here. The chat has been so engaging. It's been really fun to watch it. Here's a couple related ones on who the members should be. Anand asked, would you ever consider having a customer advisory board with non-customers, or in other words, prospects, especially if you were looking to grow into a new market? And then related to that, could you have a customer advisory board with customers that were actually competitors of each other on the board? So 2 questions there.
2 questions, and I do have some thoughts, and Bonnie, jump in when I finish here to get your opinion. So as far as prospects, I have had customers do this before, but generally doesn't work out very well because, one, they don't have your products. So sometimes if there's product discussion, or certainly the roadmap, they don't have your product, so they're not really sure kind of what you're talking about. They don't provide a lot of value. Prospects generally don't work out. And so we discourage them. I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but in practice, they tend to be not very participatory. They're kind of behind. They're not involved in some of the product discussions. I do have a blog on this exact topic. So check that out. As far as competitors, yes, we get competitors in the same room all the time. It does not result in chaos or, knockdown, drag out fights. You don't need to talk about proprietary, sensitive, secret information in your customer advisory boards. There's plenty of topics that everyone shares, plenty of challenges that are not giving away trade secrets. That's certainly our experience. We've had customers and it's not an issue. Bonnie, your thoughts?
No, I absolutely agree. It seems like it's a really legitimate concern. It seems intuitive that it would be, but it rarely, if ever, turns out to be the case, because you are really talking about, your company's strategy, and that doesn't really require them, for the most part, to reveal their secret sauce in that sort of environment. And if there is something that they would like to share with you, that is something they don't feel comfortable sharing with you publicly, but they know it sort of impacts your strategy, then this is a great opportunity for you to schedule a one-on-one with that individual.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Speaking of the topics that might be covered in the meeting, question about, do Chatham House rules still apply? And do they apply in the face-to-face meetings? Would they still apply in the virtual meeting? Maybe just start by reminding everybody what the Chatham House rules are as well, because that's fun.
Sure. The Chatham House rules basically says that all the input that you're receiving is not being attributed to a particular person or account, right? And the reason is you want your customers to, feel free to provide their thoughts, their input, their questions, their struggles. And that's really the key. It's less important often who provides that. So, you want to discuss that in the beginning, and you do want to have that for your in-person and also your virtual meetings as well. The thought being that, hey, we're here to collect input. We're not going to hunt that person down if they, have a particular input and, push them as to why and everything. Because that can be limiting. And if there's anything you feel that someone would be shy in communicate, so if someone has a problem, right, that maybe they don't necessarily want to call anyone out or put anybody in a bad position, that you want to encourage that. I hope that makes sense. And Bonnie, do you agree? Your thoughts?
Yeah, basically, the Chatham House rule is basically saying that whatever we say here in the meeting, people are free to take away and use, but you're not to, no one is to be publicly attributed to anything that's said here.
Right.
Fantastic.
And it does.
Well, we've got
meetings.
Enough questions that we could go on for 3 more hours, but assuming that people do have businesses to run at some point, Bonnie and Rob, where could folks get a hold of you if they did have further questions we didn't get to today? Is it that info@igniteag.com email? Will that work?
Yeah, and I was going to say, hey, if you do have questions, these are the questions we can certainly answer about your program. Go to our website, give us a call. We have people that, our colleague Gavin, who's an expert in customer advisory boards, can address all these questions and, spend a bit more time understanding your program and give you some, thoughts and advice on how to overcome a particular challenge.
This has been fantastic. A wealth of knowledge here. A reminder for everyone, find the whole presentation up on the Pragmatic Institute YouTube page. If you missed anything, you can scrub and rewind there, and maybe even slow Rob down if he was talking too fast. You can do that on there as well.
That would take a miracle.
Technology is wonderful.
Yes.
And then don't forget, of course, to join us again next Tuesday. This will be June 16th for the next in our product chat series, June 16th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, when we will be joined by Rich Mironoff. He's the product management guru at Mironoff Consulting, and he will share his insights on the best ways to succeed as a product leader in a time of change. We're all going through it, and he's got some insight on it, so that'll be great. Thank you so much, Bonnie and Rob. It has been an absolute pleasure. And to our audience, for all of your participation, it's been incredible. So many good questions popping up there, so many good suggestions as well.
Yeah.
Have a good week, everyone. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we will see you again next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Eddie. Thanks, Sarah. See you, Bonnie.
Bye-bye.